What's so amazing about art is that it's one of the few things that you can do where you can hold space for knowing what you're doing and be so confident, but at the same time don't know what you're doing. And there's no other thing that is like that. Like, you can't not know what you're doing with food. It's going to taste bad. And you can't not know what you're doing being a doctor in surgery. But in art, you can be that and have the confidence in being that, and some amazing stuff can come out of it.
That's Luke Ramsey, and this is The Stories That Brought You Here, a podcast dedicated to the stories of the people living in and around the Salish Sea. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk, and it's my pleasure to get to sit down in conversation with people to hear about the pivotal and life-changing stories that brought them to the point that they're at in their lives right now. Luke moved to Vancouver Island from England when he was 9. At that young age, he had a deep interest in art and luckily found some encouragement from teachers along the way. As the years went on, Luke would be influenced and be inspired by becoming involved in Victoria's punk scene, hitchhiking across Canada, international travel, collaborating with other artists, and would go on to co-found the Islands Fold residency with his wife Ange. Through his career, Luke created hyper-detailed ink drawings, painted large outdoor murals, and participated in various other art projects. In 2016, he would become the City of Victoria's first artist in residence. In this extremely wide-ranging interview, Luke will reflect on these experiences. As well, we will also talk about the power of humor, hustling, developing trust, self-confidence, April Fool's Day pranks, and so much more. This interview was so enjoyable for me to do because Luke and I have been good friends for well over a decade now, and having followed Luke's career and having an understanding about the work that he's done along the way, it was really interesting to get to sit across from him and ask him questions about his process and his history and his experience, and really dig deep into subjects in a way that you're able to with somebody you're really close with. So I really hope you enjoy this interview because it's a great one. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. If you wind up liking what you're hearing from this interview and you want to listen to more, there's a pretty big back catalog of interviews I've done along the way. So feel free to check that out. But that's then and this is now. And so first a little bit of music and then my interview with Luke Ramsey. So Luke, thank you for being here. We're doing it.
Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. I always love to give context for the listeners as to what's going on. So right now it is the end of March. It's 7 o'clock at night on a beautiful Tuesday evening. How's your day been so far?
It's been wonderful. Went for a nice hike with a friend, hung out with the dogs on the beach, and had a lovely dinner that my wife Ange cooked. So yeah, it was great.
Okay. Dogs on the beach.
Yeah.
I know that you have a quite a special dog.
We do. Yeah. We have a fur baby. His name is Reggie, and he is a huge part of our life. We're very obsessed with him, and we're currently dog sitting for Maple, who is Ange's sister's family's dog.
Any difference between taking care of one dog versus two lately?
I like it. I like seeing the companionship, and it's really cute at night when they curl up in their beds and they're by our side, and I love it. But it also comes with another level of responsibility, and I could see having two dogs being a bit of a workload. But Maple's a wonderful dog. She's a sweetheart. So yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get into the first traditional question of this podcast, and that is, what brought you to the Salish Sea?
I grew up in England, and our family moved to Victoria when I was about 9 years old. And so I consider Victoria my hometown. That's where I went to high school and grew up for most of my childhood, from like 9 until 20. And then traveled a bunch with Ange for many years. And then we ended up coming back to Victoria and then moved to Pender Island.
Okay, which is where we are now. You've done me the favor of coming to my home here on Vancouver Island doing this interview. But okay, well, so you came to the Salish Sea by way of an airplane from England. You spent your first 9 years there. What do you remember of those experiences that you had there?
I have a fond memory of my childhood. We grew up in an area called the Cotswolds. So a really beautiful area, farmland, like beautiful stone homes. And it was great. I spent a lot of time outdoors, building forts in the forest and just being a kid. And moving to Canada was a big change, but not in a drastic way for a 9-year-old to adapt to. But yeah, I have fond memories of England.
I think that for any kid, just switching schools, like in a different neighborhood, is a little bit of a trying thing at the age of 9. But you crossed over an ocean and you came to a whole other country. What do you remember from that experience exactly of being that age and going through that particular experience?
Well, in England, kids wear uniforms. And so I grew up wearing a uniform, then came to Canada, wasn't wearing a uniform for a couple of years in public school, then went to private school, so went back to wearing a uniform, and then in high school went back to public school to not wearing a uniform again. So that was kind of funny.
Okay, but in terms of making new friends, and did you have a wacky accent when you were 9 or no?
Yeah, I had a very thick, strong English accent it kind of fizzled out after about 6 months of being in Canada. Didn't take long.
All right. And when you're at that age, what interests did you have in terms of hobbies outside of school? And I guess also on top of that, what particular subjects in school were you into?
Well, I've always liked art, and I was really into drama. And yeah, art, drama, that's pretty much it. Everything else was just doing it to just get through the system, I guess.
So in elementary school, were you able to find outlets for art and drama easily enough?
Yeah. I still have like some drawings saved from being that young. And I have a strong memory of a teacher in grade 5 that was really encouraging of my art practice. Her name was Miss Holmes. And she framed up this like poster that I made for the library. She like laminated it. And so that was a pretty significant moment of having my work elevated in some capacity and having a teacher believe in me. And then I had really good art teachers ever since then. So yeah, because it was put up on a wall in like a highly visible area. So, maybe it turned on a switch in me that was like, oh, like, yeah, I could maybe pursue sharing my art outside of my own sketchbook. Yeah, art's always been something that's been a part of my life since a very young age.
So how did this interest in art unfold as the years went on? So as you got into high school, were you changing your style? Were you influenced by different things? What was happening?
Before I was in high school, I went to a private school, St. Michael's University in Victoria, that had a really supportive and good art program. So that gave me a lot of inspiration and just feeling good about art. And then when I went to high school, the teacher there was great. Miss Gibbs, she was she definitely favored the students that were more into art, but fair enough. And she would give us like a credit card to go to the store and get supplies, and just encouraged us. So stylistically, I guess high school I was really into politics and punk. So angsty, charged drawings. I made zines. That kind of content.
Okay. Yeah. And there might be people listening who don't know what a zine is. What is a zine?
Zine is a fanzine. It's like a self-produced publication, usually done quite cost-effectively, just staple and photocopied content. Could be poetry, essays, art, collage, poems, whatever.
So you started making those in high school, and you said that you had some leanings towards politics and the punk scene as well too.
Yeah, I was really into going to punk shows almost every weekend. I was in a punk band, and there would always be tables with punks selling zines. And then I asked some friends of mine to be a part of the scene that I put out. I had like comics, and me and my friend went to this SNFU punk gig in Abbotsford, and I got to interview Chi Pig, the singer of SNFU, for this zine and the guys from Gob. So that was kind of cool at the time to be able to interview these punk bands that I really admired. So that was kind of my first kind of step into self-publishing and just putting out art.
So, well, that's kind of cool. So, like, the interviews were just question and answers beside images in your zines?
Yeah, totally.
And did you find people pretty accommodating about doing these interviews?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're a older punker and a younger punk kid is like interested in what you're doing and wants you to be a part of their zine, they're pretty welcoming and supportive of that. I found the punk community was very, just a lot of fun. I have really fond memories of it.
Well, what are some of those memories about it? Because, I just mentioned before that maybe some people listening had never heard of a zine before. And I think a number of people listening have never been involved in a punk scene before. And that includes myself as well, too. For some reason, I wasn't drawn to that when I was a teenager. But what was it about that culture that drew you in when you were a teenager? And what did you like about it?
I loved how it really celebrated the DIY ethos, which is like do it yourself. If you could scrounge up enough money to buy a guitar or whatever and start a band and just make some noise, it wasn't too hard to find people that wanted to put on shows or put on shows yourself. And it's just a very inclusive community, different styles of punk, different types of punkers would go, but everybody got along for the most part. And there was always shows happening each weekend, and they were very accessible. It only cost, $2 or $5 to get into a show. And it was a lot of fun. And Victoria has a really thriving history of punk. Like No Means No and Dayglow Abortions. There's just so many bands that have come out of Victoria. And I grew up in the 90s, and it was a really good time for hardcore. And then bands like Hot Hot Heat and Wolf Parade kind of came out of that scene. So yeah, it was an amazing time.
Just to go a little further into it about what was amazing about it is that I kind of have the impression that it's just amazing in the sense that there's a community that's part of it, that there's probably good friends that you're being able to develop friendships with. But other than those things, like what else was so amazing about it? The energy, the electricity, what made it so amazing?
Well, there's energy and electricity about it. And I was a young teenager that liked to party and, get into a bit of trouble here and there. And I was into skateboarding, and it just seemed like other misfits would always be attracted to the punk show. So it was just a good way for the freaks and geeks and misfits to come together and just celebrate life and being young. Yeah. I still carry that punk ethos in me today as a 43-year-old man. And I always feel punk at heart, and I still listen to punk music.
What does that mean, though, in terms of being punk at heart? How does that get demonstrated and played out in your life these days?
Well, for me, it's about embracing the individual expression and also lending itself to community and the collective experience. So it's a combination of the two that really works for what I'm about. And I just like how punk is about doing things yourself and just finding a way. And if you don't know how to do it, then you ask your friend, or you ask a fellow punker, whoever, to help you find a way to make it happen. And a lot of that inspires collaboration. And there's an energy about it. I think some people would maybe be into punk just for the aesthetics or for the style of the sound or whatnot. But I feel like punk goes deeper than that.
Punk goes deeper than that. And
yeah.
Because you mentioned numerous times the whole do-it-yourself aspect.
Yeah. And when I grew up, there was organizations like Food Not Bombs that I would help out with, where you would be finding food resources, finding ways to not waste food and offer food to people in need or homeless people and feed them once a week, and things like that, where you're just looking for outlets to be of service to the community in some way, but in a more grassroots approach. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for explaining those things. I think that the whole world of punk obviously goes way deeper. We're just barely scratching the surface here. But I was talking to Laurie Story a few interviews ago, and he was telling me about his involvement in the punk scene for a good portion of his life. And it's neat. It's neat for people who have no idea as to what this is about to get a little bit of insight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Laurie's all about house shows, and I have a fond memory of being a part of house shows, and it'd be really fun to just see this hardcore band from Boston playing in some kid's parents' living room, and the family photos are just like vibrating off the walls because the sound is so loud. And yeah, it's just amazing thinking back on house shows. And even when I go to a house show now, I have such a feeling towards it.
Okay, so getting back into high school and maybe the end of high school here, when you reached that stage, what were you thinking about what you wanted to do with your life, and what did you eventually wind up doing?
As soon as I graduated high school, my friend Dave and I hitchhiked across Canada all the way to Newfoundland. And that was a really wild and fun experience. And then I just had the travel bug. So I just wanted to travel as much as possible. So my wife, Ange, and I have been together for 23 years. When we first started dating, she was 18 and I was 20. And we ended up traveling all over Europe and Morocco and Turkey. And so we got to really know each other pretty well on that trip and fell in love. And, that's how it all began. And then we would just work whatever jobs that we could to save money to travel. Then we did a bunch of traveling around Southeast Asia, Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore and Indonesia, which was amazing. And then we ended up teaching English in Taiwan for a year. And I went on a really fun road trip from Vancouver down to Mexico with my friend Ryan, and ended up driving into Belize and all the way back. And that was pretty memorable. So I just traveled as much as I could, as much as I could afford to. So I did that for a long time.
Well, let's hit on that hitchhike across Canada trip to start off with here. What about that experience did you learn about yourself along the way there?
Trust, just trust in the journey, trust in the person that's picking you up. There's a beautiful naivety and innocence when you're young that allows one to take a chance or go into unfamiliar territories. I find as I get older, it's maybe because I've seen things go sideways or things not work out a certain way, then maybe there's more apprehension and hesitancy to do certain things. But when looking back as myself as a younger man, that just wasn't an issue. I just go for it. And yeah. So yeah, I learned a lot about just trust, and fortunately didn't have any bad experiences with hitchhiking on that trip, but I did have a bad experience hitchhiking like years later, which made me be a little bit more cautious of hitchhiking.
Well, the numbers are pretty dramatic in favor of everything working out okay, because to get from Vancouver to Newfoundland, obviously you had to get a whole bunch of rides along the way.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, Jennifer and I, we hitchhiked top of New Zealand down to the bottom, back up to the top again, took over 100 rides, and we only had one sketchy incident happen along the way, which basically was the equivalent of, oh, we're in the car for 2 minutes and we feel uncomfortable and we asked to get out, and we did, and then that was it, right?
Yeah.
But
your spidey senses kicked in.
Yeah, but we really realized afterwards, because we actually wrote down every single person that picked us up at the end of our 9-month trip in New Zealand, and it was really fun to go through car by car, person by person, and we're like, wow, there's over 100 rides. And so that's a big number of rides, with everything working out pretty great, even being asked to stay at people's homes for the night or coming over for dinner. So yeah, anyways, I feel
we had a funny experience where this guy, this farmer picked us up, and he offered us a place to stay for the night and a meal, which is pretty amazing. And it's so funny you mention this because I'm not making this up, but he said, you guys can stay with us, but don't, like, no funny business with my daughter. And this daughter was like attractive, beautiful woman, and it's just that whole thing, like the farmer's daughter thing. But it was just funny that he like mentioned it. we're decent guys. Like we weren't going to be weird about anything, but it's just funny that he mentioned it. And amazing that a guy would just get a good vibe from us and be like, yeah, I'll put you up for the night, like a stranger. You know, it's pretty amazing that people have that charity and kindness. And I hope that continues to happen, and that people have faith in humanity and will take someone in that they don't know. But it's a vibe, right? And like you were saying with you and Geneva, when you got in that car, you just got a bad feeling, and you have to trust that.
Yeah. But to what you're saying about this person offering pretty decent amount of generosity your way, I think that really says a lot about human nature, and that I really believe that will continue on, because it is kind of an amazing thing that people would do that. But if you talk to anybody who's done any hitchhiking, you're going to hear those stories from those people. Those stories are not as few and far between as one might think.
Yeah. The friend that I hitchhiked with, his mom had a terrible hitchhiking experience in the 70s where she was hitchhiking with a friend, and this Vietnam vet with like PTSD just like pulled a gun on them and just said some crazy stuff. And fortunately, like they weren't physically hurt, but yeah, that's mentally like gonna stay with you. So yeah, it's, you know, I can totally understand why people wouldn't want to hitchhike, but having had done it so much myself, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, one more thing about that is that, so the plan was to hitchhike from Vancouver to Newfoundland. That was the objective at the beginning of the trip?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then you get to the other side and you've lived in this state of trust, because it's a very vulnerable thing, standing by the side of the road with your thumb out time and time again. It truly is. But the reward is getting picked up by somebody and getting a safe ride to the next place, wherever they're going. And then you make your way on.
Yeah. Well, it's more fun to do it with a friend for passing the time, but it's also harder to get a ride.
It totally is.
Yeah.
But the experience of getting to the end of that adventure with, you know, everything working out pretty fine, do you think that helped to springboard you into more travel afterwards that came, like you said? Because if things had gone awry at certain points and you lost a sense of trust because of some incident that came up, do you think in retrospect you would have been as eager to go travel into foreign countries afterwards?
It's a good question. I think there's something in me that keeps going, because I have been in some super sketchy situations in my years of traveling, and it hasn't stopped me, or it didn't stop me in those younger years of traveling. Yeah, I've had some really dicey things, and it's just part of the experience, and maybe there's angels on my side. I don't know. So I don't think when bad things happen, no, it hasn't stopped me from wanting to travel. Yeah.
Okay. So you do all this traveling, and then as well too, you said that part of the traveling happened with this new relationship that you entered into. I believe that was 1999 that happened. We were talking about this the other day.
Yeah.
You and your wife met on New Year's Eve, 1999.
Yeah, Y2K. Big night.
Yeah. And it's really cool, because when we were talking about this the other day, I was like, wow, how many relationships can say we met on Y2K?
It's funny, I was looking back on Y2K recently and just seeing the frenzy and fear that was propagated in the media at the time. And I was thinking about how that was just like a little sprinkling of something decades ago. I mean, that's always existed, but I was 20 at the time and I didn't care. Like I wasn't worried that the clocks weren't going to turn over and the numbers wouldn't work. You know, it just wasn't we kind of like just laughed it off. And then at this New Year's party we were at, a friend of ours like pulled the circuit breaker like right at midnight, which was really funny.
It's happening.
Yeah, to make it seem like Y2K was kicking off.
But it didn't. And actually, like,
maybe you know what? Maybe it did, and we're just living in an alternative reality.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation itself. But I feel like life didn't end. Life actually kind of like began in a different form for you on that night. Really,
it did. Yeah. So Ange and I have been adventuring ever since, and through sickness and health. You know, we've seen it all, and I think that being that young and traveling and being under these like super vulnerable, sketchy situations and sticking by each other's side through all that, really, it just flourished a love and companionship that we still have to this day.
Yeah, and so what were some of the pivotal experiences that happened between you two while you were traveling during those years?
Well, it was a different era, right? We didn't have the internet in our hands. Like, it wasn't have to go to like a internet cafe to figure stuff out. And we had guidebooks that were basically our Bible that we, used to get around and figure stuff out. And we met a lot of cool people and travelers on the same circuits that just were into having fun and adventure. And that was really rewarding. Pivotal, just going with the flow, just doing things on a shoestring budget and finding a way to stretch out our money so we could see as much as we could see. And yeah, we saw some amazing things.
It's so awesome being in your 20s and
Yeah.
and you got the world by the tail. You're traveling, figuring things out, dreaming up a future. And this future, it sounds like the two of you were dreaming up together. What were you guys imagining was going to happen when you settled down from traveling?
What did we envision for settling down?
Yeah, because when you're traveling and every day is exciting and new and holds mystery and promise, it's wonderful. But there comes a time where then the conversation happens. It's like, okay, we're going to be moving back to Canada and then we're going to be doing this, right? Because there has to be like a little bit of a planning and a framework that goes into what's going to happen when we touch down.
Yeah, I think we traveled for so long, and then it got to a point where the means of traveling was working jobs that we weren't so passionate about, and realizing that we didn't want to keep doing those jobs. And then the last traveling experience, so we had a travel experience where we went to Taiwan, but we were also there to teach English and make money, but we weren't really that into teaching English. So it was a challenging experience. And then since coming back from that time, I started pursuing art as a career or a way to make a living. And then Ange and I just combined both of our interests and then started this artist residency, Islands Fold residency that we did on Pender Island. So that became a new chapter, a new adventure. So we, instead of going other places to meet people, then we would invite people from other places to then come spend time with us on Pender Island.
Okay. Well, let's just let people know a little bit more about that briefly, and then we'll jump on to the next subject. But this one's really fascinating. I know that you've mentioned that you've talked about this numerous times, because I think that it's kind of a important phase of your life. But in terms of what you said about you and Ange combining your interests, what do you mean by that exactly?
My interest in art and collaborating with artists, and Ange's interest in health and nutrition. So I did a artist residency in New Hampshire in 2005, and that inspired me to want to start one up. And so just thought about how Ange loves to work with food, and kind of went from there. So we would be offering artists lovely, healthy, home-cooked meals.
Okay. And so artists would come for how long?
For a week. Or a week or two, usually like a week.
And at the time you had a small home that you were living in, and there was a cabin on the property?
It wasn't a small home, actually. It was quite large. It had a giant rec room with green astroturf, and we bought a ping pong table, and we had foosball in there, and it was amazing. And we were renting it for less than what a apartment would cost in the city. So it was great.
And how did you attract artists to come stay there?
Just through zine culture and having a website, and just my interest in connecting with different artists, and just starting to create a presence in certain art circles with what I was putting out there.
Cool. So how long did this go on for, like in terms of months or years, and how many artists did you have come through?
We did it for 5 years, and we had over 30 artists.
And Is there anything that you can say that you tangibly took away from that experience in terms of interacting with other artists and having an opportunity to learn from them, whether it be technique or style or just in terms of pursuing a career?
Most of the artists that we worked with had a similar kind of aesthetic or vibe, with the exception of a few. But it was, just a great opportunity to learn about someone from a different place. And Pender Island's a beautiful place, but at the time it felt like it didn't have like a hugely diverse arts community or just people in general. I mean, of course, everyone's diverse in their own way, but just, to have this artist from LA just show up and had never been on a place like Pender Island before and get to hear his like experience and stuff was pretty cool. He showed up late at night at the ferry terminal and he thought he was like in a horror movie because he's like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just showing up to this small island on the west coast of Canada with this artist I don't even really know that well and just kind of going for it. But again, it's that trust thing, it all works out. But yeah, he was freaked out because we were running a bit late, and so he just shows up to like an empty ferry terminal at night.
Showing up to the ferry terminal and you ride not being there can be a frightening experience, even with you're familiar with the place.
And then this house we were renting had a dungeon with a revolving door into like another room, and we're like showing him all this stuff. Then the night that he shows up, he's probably just thinking, "What the heck is going on here?" And then when I say it had a dungeon, it did. Like, it had this paint room that was painted kind of creepy with like gray stone, and on the front of the door it said the dungeon. And I guess the guy that lived there used to make props for kids' TV shows or something, or he made children's books. I don't know what the full story is, but he had all these little wooden characters around the property, and it was a very trippy house. Okay. And it had a dark room as well.
I was actually just driving by that house today and talking about how a friend has lived there for years. They bought the house, and when you guys were renting it, and they were just in the process of moving, saw all the moving going on, and that
Liz and Alex.
Yep. Yeah. And some new owners are going to be taking over that house in a matter of days, it looks like. So
it's a cool house, and it's a beautiful spot, and I would assume that the dungeon's been painted over.
I think it has been. I think Al said they did some work.
Okay. Yeah.
So you do this collaborative project with your wife and bringing over artists, and this goes on for about 5 years. During this time as well, too, that in terms of working with artists and making your own art, what's going on that side of things? Because it sounds like you made the decision that you wanted to become a full-time artist.
Yeah, I was working at the gas station and had this epiphany that I wanted to self-publish like a full-color art book and just save up enough money to do that. And so I did that, and then left my job at the gas station and just started pursuing art more full-time. Islands Fold was covering its expenses through the zines and art and prints that we sold online. And we got to actually go to do a couple of exhibitions overseas. We did one in Copenhagen, and we did a show in LA, which was a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, I wasn't able to pay myself a wage or anything from doing it. So then I realized I needed to just start taking on more illustration jobs. So I did a lot of illustration for a few years to start pursuing my own way of income through art making. And it just got to a point where it just didn't feel like we could keep doing the residency. And I have no regrets about it ending at a certain time. Like, it was a good chunk of time, and we got a lot done. And got some good memories from it.
When you say illustration jobs, what do you mean exactly?
Just like editorial illustration work for like different magazines. Like, I had a good run with the New York Times for a few years, where their art director was asking me to do work, just stuff like that, which was really good. And an artist that I connected with through Islands Fold put me on to a pretty good illustration gig. So that was a good boost for me. Another artist just giving me an opportunity, which is pretty amazing. So just, yeah, building on different relationships over the years. And that's how it kind of started up.
This is something I want to hear a little bit more about, is that you mentioned that you're working at the gas station and then you made a decision that you wanted to follow through on taking your art career more seriously. And so that sounds great on paper, but the reality of that is that that's a bit of a sketchy proposition in terms of being able to regularly bring in income, and it's a big leap to do that. What made you decide that it was important at that time to follow through on that decision, and what kept you motivated and going?
I don't think it's that sketchy being a young person in my 20s with no dependents or huge responsibilities, and rent wasn't, that expensive. And like I've always had a belief in myself and things working out. And I think that's a huge part of it, is just, yeah, having that belief and just feeling, a confidence that it's gonna work out. So, and I liked working at the gas station. It was a pretty chill job, and the people I worked for were really nice. The people I worked with were super nice too. But I also knew that I wouldn't be able to make enough money in that job to pursue certain things that I wanted to do as well. So yeah, it just timing seemed good. And yeah.
Okay. Well,
out.
you use the words having a confidence and then also a belief in yourself. Those are things that not everybody comes by. And I am curious as to where that developed for you, because I think that in most people's lives, that those feelings are fleeting, or they're intermittent, but it's really hard to hang on to those for long periods of time. So with you saying that you had those feelings, where do you think those first began within you?
I feel that for most of my life, I've had an inner confidence or an inner knowing about pursuing the things that I want to pursue. And that can be a very solo motivated journey. But as I get older, like I have more appreciation or understanding that the individual spirit or the self-confidence or the inner knowing, the inner love can only go so far unless it has the support and the nurturing of others that believe in it. And it's a reciprocal thing. And if one is like too self-motivated and doesn't have a connection to others or feel like supported in others in a holistic, reciprocal way, then I think that could be quite a dangerous thing and could lead to, I don't know, sense of loneliness or just, I don't know. I can't speak for others, but I can only speak for myself, is that I feel like I've had good supports over the years, like, mentioning the art teachers that I mentioned earlier, just give me that extra little nudge. I had a good upbringing. My parents were good to me. So yeah, I mean, I've been afforded a lot of privileges that maybe that some people don't have. That being said, I don't think the privileges are the only thing that helped me have that confidence. I've always been making art, and that's just something that I know that I've wanted to do, and it's how I've entertained myself. And so I guess I'm just fortunate that I've been able to keep doing that.
I like what you're saying about it being this reciprocal act, that it's not just one way, but it's really cool to hear the recognition that like you were able to actually receive encouragement that was being provided to you. That's what I'm understanding you're saying.
Yeah, and it also ties into that thing we were talking about earlier about hitchhiking and trust in people, going out of their way for a stranger. Or there was, when we were running Islands Fold, the residency, this artist from New York, Mike Perry, he just mailed us a check for $1,000. And he was like, I wish you guys all the best. Like, I love what you're doing. Like, no strings attached. He wasn't like asking for anything in return. He was just giving us a donation. Like, I really like what you guys are doing. And that had a huge impact on me. I'm like, wow, like this artist that is getting cool projects and doing work is actually like giving back to another artist. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. And I feel like that's the karmic force that exists in the universe. It's just it's yeah, like not just giving something to someone to get something back, but just giving for giving. And then when you receive that gift, then it'll go out that way in another way to someone else. So, it's I do feel blessed for that, just having those karmic forces enter my life.
That's really great. And on top of this, well, too, something that I failed to mention is that you have no professional training. You didn't go and take any art classes post-secondary or do anything along those lines?
No, I thought of traveling as my education, and I went to lots of museums and galleries and just explored the world and looked at art in that way. That was kind of my approach. I think art school can be really great for people that want to learn certain skills and learn a certain way or connect with different artists and stuff like that. It just wasn't something that I pursued.
Yeah, and that's kind of amazing. My wife did go to art school, and she didn't finish, but we were talking about this quite a while ago, and she brings up the fact that a huge part about being at art school is making connections with people. That's what she
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
Good,
and
for better and worse, I mean, some of it is making connections with certain systems that are nepotistic or just hierarchical or built in a certain way that whatever gatekeeping type stuff. There's that, or there's like organic, natural connections that are about supporting each other and blossoming a creative community. So, yeah.
But it sounds like you were able to build up connections through creations on your own, through, in particular, what you described with Island's Fold.
Yeah, just reaching out to different people or just finding someone's address and mailing them a piece of art or a zine or something, or just going to the bookstore and just looking up art magazines and looking up art directors or whatever, just like mailing out to people.
Yeah. And just so people also have context as well, too, at this time, what style of art were you focusing on?
Mainly drawings, like cartoons and abstract drawings for the most part. Yeah.
Which were incredibly elaborate and intricate and epic, some of them for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, some for sure. And actually, I'll mention, too, that you and Jennifer were supportive of Island's Fold, and you bought art from us like early on, before we even had like a deeper friendship. And I thought that was really cool that you guys, as creative people, believed in that too and were supportive. So, it was just cool to see people just appreciate it and get behind it.
Totally. Actually, I commissioned you to do a piece of art for a fringe show that I was doing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I was so impressed with what you did. I asked you to do a Russian doll of myself.
Russian doll Chris. Yeah.
Anyway, I love that. I still have that today.
Yeah. And at that time, I was really into doing illustration. So I was quite receptive to someone approaching me and being like, I have this idea. This is what I'm looking for. And me being, if I could get excited about it and get behind it, then be able to draw it. I mean, I wouldn't just draw anything for anybody, but yeah, I mean, illustration is kind of fun because it's trying to solve a problem, basically.
What do you mean it's trying to solve a problem?
It's someone's offering a challenge or a problem to solve. Like, I have these words, these ideas, but I need to put it to some image, but it needs to convey this thing, or needs these colors or whatever, like all these different components. So it's trying to find a solution to that proposal.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so with what I asked you to do, to use as an example, I said, okay, I want to do a fringe poster for the show that I'm doing, and I would like to have myself as a Russian doll with, open up. And I don't even know how specific I was with what I was asking for, because I wasn't even too sure. And I was thinking, I'll just leave it in Luke, the artist's hands to do. And that plays into what you're saying about problem solving, about, maybe having a vague description of what's required. So in terms of that problem solving that's going on, is that a friction that you find enjoyable or painful?
Most times it's joyful, and sometimes it's painful. Depends on the client. Depends what the circumstance is. I mean, in the almost 20 years of doing this, I've only had less than a handful of projects that that fell apart or didn't work out. So I think that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. But the beginning process of sitting there at a blank page and being asked to produce something, do you find that there's a lot of time spent figuring it out, or you just get pen to paper and just figure it out that way? What's your process?
Yeah, maybe I'll sketch something out or just think about it, go for a hike and just get the gears going on in the brain and just think about it.
Before we did this interview today, I went through your website and I was scrolling through looking at the epic scope of work that you've done, and it's certainly not everything, and it's just mind-boggling to me, man. Like, it really is, right? Like that.
No, thanks.
You're welcome, and I mean that sincerely. What you've been able to create over the years is it's phenomenal to me in terms of the amount of work that you've done. In terms of constantly going to the well of creativity and coming up with new ideas, can you put into words how you go about doing that?
Coming up with new ideas?
Yeah.
It's been a well that's been always flowing. Like I always have ideas. Executing those ideas is where it can be more challenging. An idea in my heart and mind to just put it on paper is one thing, but if I want to take that idea that's on paper and turn it into something bigger than that, whether it's a mural or a sculpture or animation or whatever, then that's a whole different thing. So I don't run out of ideas, but I think what I can get caught up in is what's the intention or the purpose of where those ideas are going to end up. Being an artist that hasn't, what am I trying to say? If there's no audience for the work, then it's going to be a lot harder for me to make a living from it, obviously. So where can the piece exist in the world outside of my own world? And sometimes that can be a really hard thing to figure out.
Huh. Okay. I never even considered that, but so that's actually an idea or a thought that's pretty front of mind for you, is that not just creating the piece of art, but also what is the marketability or saleability, if that's a word.
Not even the marketability or saleability. It doesn't have to have a financial reward or something from it, but just why is it deserving of existing outside of my own realm? Like what's the point, basically? Like what's the intention here? What's the point? And if there's no point or purpose, then it's going to be hard for me to just put it out there, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I'm curious about that point or purpose. Does that get conveyed to you through words in your own mind, or how is that articulated? Or is it just a thought and within yourself that winds up coming out as you're creating the art or before you create the art? Are you able to pinpoint that at all?
Maybe it's just a thought that I need to just actually put into a feeling and then let that feeling work itself out in the world outside myself. Maybe that's just what happens, is just I won't know until I try. And then once I try, then I'll get the understanding of what that intention or purpose is. So yeah, I guess thinking too much about or having concern of the intent of where it's going to end up, sometimes just putting it out there will give itself an answer. And that's what makes like street art and just, renegade art projects that just get put out into the world. And I do that. I painted a abandoned building recently, which was super fun, and had no idea about what I was going to paint, just showed up and did something. And I really enjoy that. And I do that often in my own studio practice and in my sketchbook or on canvas, but to do it out in the world like that is very exciting. And then I want to sometimes tap into that excitement in the world where I can make a living from it. And most times I do. So I'm grateful for that.
Just to clarify as well, too, as you're working on the piece of art, the reason for doing it can come more into focus and or also change as that process is happening, where the paint's going on to canvas or wood or whatever it is you're working on.
It can, yeah, and it can run off into like another thing that will spark a whole new thing. Yeah.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about art, right? Like that's, and so, to bring it back to what's going on in this very moment, this conversation that we're having, right? Like I have kind of a purpose about what I want to attempt to accomplish before we get started, but I never know how these conversations are going to go, right? If I did, there would be no point in doing them, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, it's like the creativity of a conversation between two people is that you'll say a thing that'll trigger me into thinking something, and then away we go, right? And the audience is there to be a witness at a later date to hear this, and that's what's so beautiful about creativity. And I feel like having that creative flow and spark in your life is such a wonderful thing to have. And for me, looking at you, who's someone who's a close friend, and like how you're able to create that or turn this experience of creativity into a living for as many years as you have, which is just amazing. And like I really huge kudos to you for spending as much time as you do in the world participating in a creative way and having such amazing output. I think we're going to get back into a little bit more talking about creative process and art, but I want to also make sure that we bring this up to speed with your time working as the artist in residence in Victoria, which is a big thing I wanted to talk about with you here today. So
yeah, we can talk about that. And I appreciate the kudos. I do, but at the same time, I don't. It's like I have like thank you. Like I have gratitude for that, but at the same time, it's like I don't know what else I would be doing. Like I'm going to be doing it anyway, so it's not like I'm. And sure, I have some challenges like anybody, but I'm not. What am I trying to say? It's not like I don't have hardships, but overall, like it's not. It's easy going. So it's just come natural to me. So it's not like I don't know, like people. Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
well, okay, with writers, for instance, I've spent periods of time over my life writing, and I've listened to a lot of writers over the years, and there is a common theme of this deep struggle about trying to get the work done because it's hard. It's hard to do that particular kind of art form, but I don't think that's unique to writing. I think that being able to sit down and create art on a regular basis is quite a challenging thing to do. But it doesn't, for me, like it, in talking to you in the past and now as well too, it seems that that's not necessarily your experience, that it's as much as like a struggle to you as it is just an embracing of who you are and what you got to do during the day.
Yeah, totally. And the struggles are there, but they're not making me lose sleep at night. Something you said before we got into this though that really sparked in me thinking about is what's so amazing about art is that it's one of the few things that you can do where you can hold space for knowing what you're doing and be so confident, but at the same time don't know what the fuck you're doing. And there's no other thing that is like that. Like you can't not know what you're doing with food. It's going to taste bad. You can't not know what you're doing flying a plane. You can't not know what you're doing being a doctor in surgery. But in art, you can be that and have the confidence in being that, and some amazing stuff can come out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. How often do you have that feeling come across you where you feel like you don't know what you're doing?
Once in a while, and it's amazing, exhilarating. And that usually happens in, the stuff that's just free flowing and just see what comes of it. That said, though, it can go off the rails a bit. I need to kind of reel it back in and then get back to like some inner like source or reference or things that do work to then ground it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you said it can be exciting, I'm sure that can really be exciting because if that were to never happen in your life again, wouldn't you think that would be such a loss?
Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing about art is that the subjectivity of it is that not knowing what you're doing, but just going forth anyway. I mean, it can be perceived anyway by anybody. So it doesn't necessarily like it feels, I'm sure, like there's no ground underneath you at certain points, but yeah, you can always get back to a safe place, I would imagine, by acknowledging that this is art and it's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
So you were the artist in residence in Victoria beginning in late 2016. And you did some amazing work around the city of Victoria. I had the wonderful opportunity to speak to Catherine Calder, who took over that position from you after you left, and asked her about her involvement with her particular projects. And now I'm going to ask you. But before we get to that, I don't want to gloss over what happened between that time on Pender and getting that job with the city of Victoria, which, by the way, that was the first time they ever had an artist in residence. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we moved from Pender up to the Sunshine Coast, and a friend of mine was starting up a coffee shop there, Colin McRae, starting up this base camp coffee shop. So Ange and I were at the beginning of that, helping him and some other people get it going. And then I was just still doing the art, and started getting more into painting. And then a friend reached out and just said, like, check this out, like artist in residency position. I think you should look into this thing. And I was like, oh yeah, this seems like would be a good fit for me, because I feel like I'm community orientated. I've done a lot of collaboration, and yeah, I went for it. And it was such an amazing experience for me. It helped me do a lot of things that I didn't think I would be able to do in a reasonably short amount of time. The residency lasted for 2 years and 3 months. And I just, took on a lot of stuff. And I took on a lot of jobs outside of the residency too at the time. So just worked full tilt for a few years. And I got pretty burnt out at one point where I was like, oh, this isn't healthy. Like, I need to check in with myself here, because I was pretty gung-ho.
But in that time, you were pretty gung-ho because you wanted to get a lot done with this job that you
just wanted to seize the opportunity and seize the moment and ride the wave as much as I could.
Okay, let's dig into some of the pieces that you did. Maybe we'll culminate with the piece that is on the Women in Need store at the side of that building there, which was a huge collaborative project you did. But maybe if you want to fill in the listeners some of the work that you did around the city that was temporary, and some of the stuff that's still there today.
Sure. So if anyone's interested, you can check out my website. There's a section where I documented all the work that I did, because I did do a lot of different projects, solo and collaborative. The wind mural that you mentioned was a collaborative mural with 10 different artists. And it was this pathway that kind of wraps around the side of 4 different walls. And there was a very specific color palette that tied everything together. And the transition from each artist to the next flowed really nicely. It was beautiful. It was a really fun project, but also time sensitive. And I like having a leadership role, and I like to delegate and understand who would be good for what and all that stuff. But being a boss sucks. I find, like, trying to make sure that everybody shows up on time when there's like time constraints and stuff like that. And artists are, I'm an artist, and we're a sensitive, weird kind of breed, and it's hard to manage all that. So it had its challenges, but overall it was great, because everybody was like friends with one another and just create these connections, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, there's a lot of projects, but one project that really stood out to me was doing this mural down on the water. And then to launch this mural, I invited Denny, who I went for a hike with this morning, to play some violin music. And then I invited this woman named Cedar, who's a yoga meditation teacher. I invited her to do guided meditation. And then I asked this costume designer that works on in the film industry to help create this owl tent suit that I did a drawing of. So her and her daughter built this amazing owl tent suit. So I had the tent character next to this mural with Denny playing violin and this woman, Cedar, doing the guided meditation. And then people will go inside the tent suit and put on a VR headset and then make VR art online for the first time, like people that have never experienced creating VR art. So it had all these different components and it was super wild and it was fun.
Multimedia.
Yeah, totally. And I also mentioned this too, when I was painting the mural, this elderly gentleman was walking down the beach and he was not too happy with what I was painting, and he shared his opinions with me, and I was like, okay, well, I appreciate you sharing with me with that. Art's open to interpretation. He was kind of grumpy about it, but whatever. And then he ended up being a participant in this thing. So it was kind of fun to see this guy being grumpy a few weeks prior, but then he was open to being a part of this immersive experience.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so another mural that I just love is the Mother Protector Hawk and Home mural.
That's the mural that I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And so I'll put a link to your website and people can find it there. But just the picture of that one, looking back on that, because I've seen it in person, but I just love the idea that was conceived there about having the image of the bird and like the wing wrapping around and sense of protection and
thanks.
And just using the natural structure and the shape of it and then coming up with an idea.
Yeah, creating that natural structure to then become the art itself. And that's kind of rare when that happens, where you get a curved wall like that. And I always like to consider the environment of a mural in a piece and how it can relate to the surrounding areas.
Yeah, and then something else as well too was it on New Year's that you were working outside of the Parliament buildings?
Yeah, I projected animations on the Empress Hotel and the Parliament buildings on New Year's, and that was really cool to see. Yeah, they did a really good job of mapping out the projections for that project, and yeah, it was just cool growing up in Victoria and how iconic those buildings are, and just to see my art like moving across the Empress and then looking up and seeing hotel guests in the windows like inside the art was pretty cool to see.
Totally. And so that's an example of one of the temporary ones. It was like, just an event that took place on one particular evening. But to this day, the murals that you put up in different places throughout the city of Victoria remain.
Yeah, well, some, but the Hawk and Home one, it was done in a very, like in a hotspot graffiti zone. And so when I was in the position of artist in residence, they got a letter from a resident that was saying like, isn't there a mural in this spot? Like there's all this pretty crass graffiti. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, let's entertain this idea. So I proposed to the city that maybe we could do a mural there, and got two other artists to add to it. So Jill Stanton painted the inside, and then this other graffiti artist, Chris, did the top part of the path, and then that mural basically was like untouched for a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years, but then the odd tag would start showing up, and then we coated the mural with like anti-graffiti coating, but that stuff doesn't really prevent like a big buff or whatever. It doesn't really do that much, and the weather conditions down there are really severe. It's a really stormy area, so that wall gets attacked pretty bad. So anyway, over the years, it's just started collecting these tags and graffiti, but now it's like morphed into this like beautiful organic graffiti wall. And I feel like there needs to be, quote, free walls for graffiti for people to just experiment and throw stuff up. So it's just in this kind of funny spot where it's, that's what it's become. And before they were just painting it over gray for many years, which is super boring. So I hope it just stays this way.
So it sounds like you have a pretty positive outlook in terms of the work that you did being tagged and
Oh yeah,
graffitied?
it's a total like it's a win-win. I got to have my art in this beautiful spot on the beach. I got to paint that mural in the most beautiful place, and then see that work exist there for almost a couple years, and then it just organically change into this new thing, which I hope it remains. Like I think that's way better than it just being a gray wall.
How did you find doing the work? Because you just mentioned that you got to work in this beautiful place. And wherever you're doing a mural, you're outside and presumably in the public sphere with people being around and watching what you're doing a little bit. And you have the outdoor elements. How do you enjoy the process of doing murals?
Well, that's just hard not to enjoy. It's like on the beach, windsurfers in the distance, beautiful sun, and people just enjoying life on the beach. Yeah, it was wonderful. It's not always that way. I did a mural in Calgary a couple years ago at a homeless shelter and addiction clinic, and that was like a pretty intense place to do a mural. I met some beautiful people there and a lot of characters, and it was a great experience. But it was a very challenging place to paint because, yeah, it just was. So yeah, it varies.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a count, like more or less, of how many murals you've been a part of in your life?
Maybe like almost 30 murals I've done, I think. I haven't been doing as many in recent years. I've been doing more studio work, and I love doing murals, but it's a lot of work. They're very physical.
Can you remember the first mural that you were asked to do?
First mural I was asked to do, this is a good question, was in Taiwan, and it was at this bar that was run by this alcoholic professor who hated the mural so much that he painted it over. I didn't even get time to take a photo of it. So it was like pretty...
He's lightning quick. If you didn't have time to take a picture of it, man, that guy works fast.
Well, yeah, I painted it and then went home, like patting myself on the back, thinking, "Oh, I did such a good job of this thing." And then I come by the next day and it's just gone. It's like totally erased. And I'm like, "Dude, like what's up? Why did you paint over this?" Like, and he's like, "I hate Hello Kitty." And what I did is I did inverted Hello Kitties. So I was trying to play off it because Hello Kitty is huge in Taiwan and Asia. It's all over the place. And so I did an inverted one where I took Hello Kitty and turned Hello Kitty upside down and turned it into this like vampire kind of ghost thing that was basically Hello Kitty upside down. But he couldn't see that. All he could see was the Hello Kitty thing. So yeah, it was a humbling experience, but it was good to just have that experience and just and move on. And then I ended up doing a mural at a toy store in Taipei like a few months later.
Okay. How did that come about, being asked to do a mural in Taipei?
I was just in this kind of cool fashion clothing store that sold cool art toys, and I just started talking to the guy about stuff that we liked, and then I just asked maybe like, "Would you want to have a mural?" And he was like, "Sure." Like bought me lunch and beer and stuff, and yeah, it was great.
Okay. This is something I'm interested as well too, is that because from what I was aware of early on in your career, it was basically ink and paper you were working with.
Yeah.
And so to make that transition to go to drywall, presumably, and house paint, did you find that an easy transition with switching to those materials, or not really?
Yeah. I mean, I was primarily doing like hyper detailed freehand drawings, like pen and ink drawings for a really long time. And doing murals here and there, which were the complete opposite. I would do more bold layered shapes, abstract shapes. And then doing murals for so long that I just realized that, well, I could actually just start putting this onto canvas. I'm putting all this effort into walls. Why not start doing it on canvas? So then I started painting canvases maybe 7 years ago.
When I saw that transition happen, that was such a beautiful thing to see, because your style totally changed in my mind, right?
Yeah.
What were you experiencing during that time creatively that you can speak about in terms of the direction that you were going and the inspirations you were having?
I was doing murals indoors and outdoors, and I did some murals that were actually quite reflective of my drawing style for a few years. The one being a collaboration I did with Josh Hollanati in Edmonton. I did one at Drake Hotel in Toronto. So there were some that were hyper detailed, like drawing style murals. But I think what happened with me is that I was drawing for so long, doing a lot of illustration work, and then Madrona Gallery gave me a really awesome opportunity to have a solo exhibition with them. So I did these really large, intricate drawings and did a couple of shows with them with the drawings. And then I got to this point where I felt like I was trying to push these drawings so far in my mind that I felt like I kind of got to where I wanted to go with them. And so I just felt like a change. And so that's when I started wanting to push more into the painting. I still draw, and it's still a part of my practice and always will be, but I've just carved out more time now for doing painting.
How did things change for you once you decided to put more time into painting versus drawing?
I think painting kind of gave me a little bit more time to not feeling, I guess I hustled for so many years, and just being part of getting my work out there and doing so many different jobs for different people and stuff. And I feel like painting kind of changed my perspective on that a lot.
Well, what do you mean by that exactly?
Just afforded me more time, I think. Just yeah.
Okay, well, when you said that you spent a lot of time hustling in the past, because to me, like, this is a great success story, right? The idea that you really spent a lot of time dedicating yourself and working really hard, and
it just sounds a success story.
It's a success story, Luke. It is. Well, okay, so seriously, man, how many people are working artists out there?
Lots. And I feel like it's not going to work out great for everyone, but there's so many artists that are thriving and making a living off it. And I feel like art has become more appreciated and integrated into things. People take notice of it more now, I feel.
But in terms of me saying like this is a success story, and like you and I are friends, right? So let's cue a little bit of good ribbing and joking around here. But you just talked about hustling. You just talked about like having years spending to hustle and like make things happen, and it afforded you more time, right? If you didn't put that time into hustling, then
oh yeah, for sure. That's why I really like hip hop music. Like I like listening to rappers. I didn't have to deal drugs to get to what I'm doing, so that's awesome. But a lot of the rappers that I listened to did. They were on the street selling drugs, and then just hearing of them coming up and what they had to do to survive. And there's just this bravado and energy that I find really inspiring in that music. You know, aside from the like misogyny and violence, it's like there's an energy, and the hustle. It's a weird one. It can be interpreted in two different ways. There's the hustle of it that's not so great in terms of where people are stepping on others to get to a certain place in like a capitalist type structure. But then there's the hustle of just believing in what you do enough to just cold call or knock on doors enough to not be afraid, and not be afraid to hear no, and not afraid for someone to say they're not into your thing, because it doesn't matter, because you believe in it enough to just keep going. And that's the hustle that I'm speaking to. But it can be exhausting, or it's a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so when you said that you were doing the artist in residency, and then you were feeling a sense of burnout because you were working on other things on the side as well, too. And then I believe you mentioned as well that you wanted to grab hold of the opportunity and really make something.
I never felt like burnt out with the Islands Full thing. I just felt that I wasn't able to make...
No, the artist in residency.
There was a moment there where I was burnt out for sure. Like I just took on way too much at one time.
Right. But that stemmed from sort of recognizing that this was like a unique moment in your working career where you have this title and you have this opportunity, and then grabbing hold and making sure that like you could maybe pull yourself up to the next level after that. Is that accurate? Or
I just seized that opportunity. I figured that was the time to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm super curious about how things work from behind the scenes a little bit, because you do commissions for people. You also do commissions for businesses. People approach you and ask you to do jobs, and this is a source of your income, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And then doing that. So, how do people find you? Like, what sort of asks do you get? Because you get asked to do murals, or to do a label for a beer can, or to do a private piece for somebody's home. When these offers come in, what sort of a sense do you get when you open up the email and you see these things? Is it like sweet, or like is there a negotiation that goes on? How does that all look from behind the scenes, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often saying sweet and grateful. I guess there's so many different um, people and projects and things that come about because I feel like I'm able to just explore so many different ways of getting my art out into the world, different mediums, different people, whatever. So I feel like it's kind of like throwing out as many seeds into the garden and see which ones will grow. And so that's kind of how it is. It's organic. And once in a while I do think like, how did this person find out about me? But I've never asked to, because I felt like that would just be weird to ask. Like, how did you find out about? I don't know. I mean, maybe I have thought about it, but I've never actually asked someone.
You could send them a survey after you're done doing the work. How did you find out about Luke Ramsey?
It's not a bad idea. Eh? Survey, get the insight, the stats.
Yeah.
Yeah, just different things. I mean, it's all like interconnected. I find one thing leads into another. Yeah, word of mouth, or just being like connected to a mural festival project or a different thing. I mean, it's all about connectivity. It all connects.
What's been one of the projects that you've worked on in recent years that surprised you in terms of really feeding your soul? Because, like, it's work, right? Some work is better than others, but what's been one that really stands out as like, wow, that felt really good?
I recently finished up a project that I didn't think was going to work out, and it really filled my soul when it did. And I feel like when I was speaking to how sometimes there are hardships or there are challenges, sometimes in those, if I can find the way to get through those challenges and keep my ego in check, then it can be an amazing thing. And if I let my ego get the better of me and feel like, oh, I don't need to like compromise on this or find just whatever, then it's not going to work out. And so what I've learned over the years is to just that problem solving thing that I was talking about, just find a way to make it work. And so I was approached by the Canadian government. Sounds kind of funny to say it like that, but the Canadian government approached me to do a double-sided mural for their embassy in El Salvador, and pitched them this idea, and they weren't super on board with my approach to it. And the way that they responded to it, I was like, oh, this is not going to happen now. This is like going to go super sideways. And maybe it was just the language and the way it came across, or maybe I took it a different way. But I just paused for a moment. And I just really got inside of like, what do they want here? And how can I make this work for them and for me, so that we're like both super excited about it? And took me a moment to just figure it out. And then I figured it out and came back with them with something that did work, and it worked out. And so it's going to be 2 different images on this wall that comes down from the ceiling that separates a larger room. And I haven't seen it. Oh, and it's a digital piece, so it'll get printed up on this wall. And so I haven't seen it installed yet, but I think it's getting installed any day now. So I'm really excited to like see the final piece.
Cool. So like an aspect to that was likable about this experience was the fact that there was like a ability for you to like step back and, like you said, check your ego a little bit, and then also problem solve.
Yeah, because it's this thing where there's this opportunity for me to showcase my world or my like how I see the world through my art. And there's also this opportunity to share in how this space and what that environment wants to convey too. So it's a partnership. It's a collaboration of sorts. And so I've got to just find a way to understand the context of like what that environment is going to be and still find a sense of play in it, because I've never done work that's been, or take on work that's highly prescriptive. That just takes the fun out of it for me. So there still has to be that level of fun, but sometimes a little bit of those challenges can help something else come out that maybe I didn't expect. And sometimes a creative director or someone else can make a suggestion that's awesome, and then I can work off that. It really depends.
Well, there's so much to this, man. Like, there's so much that goes on that, like, I don't quite understand from behind the scenes that we'll have more time in the future to talk about. But I think it's really intriguing to hear just even like a bit of the stories about being contacted by the Canadian government, and they didn't want you to become part of like a covert operation or anything. They just wanted you to do.
I can't speak about that.
Oh, come on now. But no, I think there's so many cool little elements about that, and like the back and forth as well too. About like we have an idea, and then you have a concept, and they want to change it, and how it goes back and forth. Then ultimately something does get created, and people get to see it because it goes out into the world.
Yeah. It's also, it's funny for me because I'm, like I was talking, like being a punk rocker and growing up with punk, and I've been, have this sort of anti-authoritarian sentiment, and I've never been, I've worked with municipal governments, with the federal government. Like I work with governments, but in a way where I'm like seeing that there are departments and aspects of government that believe in art. I want to support art. I want to share that art in other parts of the world. And that's a beautiful thing. And just because I don't like governments around the world that, want to buy weapons to murder people, it's such a hard thing for me to balance sometimes, is that when is it okay to say yes to this project and when it isn't? And we've spoken about this, but last April Fool's Day, I posted up a thing where I said that I made some art for this military fighter jet company, and I was getting my art like put on this fighter jet, and people were like, "Oh, right on, like congratulations, man!" And I'm just like, "What the heck? Like, did my audience not know like what I'm about?" And that was such a weird like social experiment to see, because I would never put my art on a war machine. But
yeah,
it was April Fool's, so I was like thought that people would like get it right away, but a lot of people. And I think what's interesting too is because I've done so many different projects over the years, from like, my friend's band, doing a poster for my friend's gig, to doing some like corporate client, is that people would think, oh yeah, well this guy would be open to doing art on different things. So yeah, it was just interesting to see the response to that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it was. And you have a history of being a April Fool's practical joker.
You and I have a history of, can we talk about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah. So I'll just give the setup here is that when Jennifer and I first moved to Vancouver Island, we became friends with Luke and Ange, and then Luke came up with this idea to do an April Fool's Day prank and enlisted our help. And the prank was?
The prank was to take down all of the notices and posters on the community bulletin board at the Driftwood Center, put them in an envelope so they weren't destroyed, but put them to the side, and then create our own posters and notices and put them up on the board. So we had things like missing boa constrictor snake. The movie playing at the hall that month was going to be some like really horrible movie. And didn't we have an ad for like a pot dealer? This was like before pot was legal.
Yeah, totally.
So
it was somebody was looking for a job. They'd moved down from the Kootenays, and I put some images of pot leaves on there, and they were a green thumb, and they could help you with that. Also, there was going to be a community referendum on whether or not we should increase the deer population, because there was a survey done that tourists really like the deer, so maybe we needed to increase them by 50%.
Yeah, we got really creative, and we had quite a variety, and it was a good one. I think people were like taken by some of them.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I went back to look at it because we did it in the middle of the night. We took down all the signs and then we carefully put them in a manila envelope and like tacked that onto the bottom of the board. And then every single sign on there we replaced with a fake one. So there's about 20 fake signs.
It's like fun mischief. Nobody gets hurt and kind of rebellious.
It was kind of awesome. It was good. Little middle of the night mission.
Yeah.
And people had actually written things on the posters being like, this is crazy.
Yeah. But this, I mean, I haven't mentioned this to anyone ever outside of like us and maybe a few friends. So it's kind of funny to talk about it now.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
it's been 13 years or something like that.
Sure.
So we're safe. We're good.
Yeah.
I was thinking about humor today. So you were coming over and I was thinking, what are we going to talk about? Right. Because we've known each other for a long time. And I was thinking about how this conversation was going to go. This is a podcast. Other people are listening. And I thought, okay, well, there's going to be a level of humor that Luke and I will not go to in this podcast because
you got that right.
Yeah.
we got that out earlier, didn't we?
We totally did. We totally did get that out earlier. But it's interesting, like the intersection of humor and friendship. I thought about this, and that you and I have pretty out there senses of humor, I would say, and I feel like we're able to connect on that level by saying some things that might be misinterpreted if they were to be overheard in public, let's say. But within the safety of our friendship, we're able to communicate on a level that is really enjoyable for me and fun to do. But there's few people I can go there with. But what's your interpretation of the importance of humor in your life? Because as I mentioned before, you do love playing practical jokes, especially April Fool's Day jokes.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a trickster and a shit disturber or stir the pot kind of guy sometimes for sure. I think humor again, to bring up this word trust, it's like when you have a trust with the audience or the person you're telling a joke to or a comfort level. Like you think about like stand-up comics that we really love and they can say the harshest things to an audience that will just go along for that ride with them and get away with it because they've built that trust with the audience. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But the other, and this is actually not funny at all. I'm going to say something that's not funny at all. But a few weeks ago, our dear friend's dog of 17 years passed away. And this dog was a friend of our dog's. And my wife and I like helped our friend like through the whole process. So we met at the vet. The dog got put down because it was 17 years old and it was time and it was a really hard thing to do. And we carried this dog back to their property and we dug a hole and we did a ceremony, said some nice words, shed some tears, the whole thing. And it was really sad, emotional and beautiful experience. And then we took our friend out for dinner the next day just to check in and see how she was doing. And this is a friend that I would say is in the same comfort zone as with the friendship I have with you, where I feel like I can joke around or like say the harsh things and she'll say the harsh things too. And it's like in jest and it's fun. And I love that. And I love having friendships where you can like joke around and go to those places. Right. And so I have a similar friendship with this friend where we just kind of rib each other and just whatever, tease each other and just say the harshest things. So we take our friend out for dinner the next night. And in the casualness of this friendship and what I've also known, of course I had like sensitivity to the fact that we just buried this dog like the day before. Like it was a pretty intense thing. And there were even jokes made like during that process to like lighten the tone of the day, right? That happens. But this night at dinner, I tried to tell a joke that just didn't land. Like it was just so inappropriate because it was related to the passing of her dog, and she didn't totally get it. And she was obviously having a tough time because she's going through this grief and through this process, and she didn't like totally get it, but then she did register it. And my wife was like not really having it. But there was like enough love in that friendship for it to like not be a thing, not be an issue. And I just say able to just recognize that it wasn't like appropriate, but it was okay. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just okay that I tried to be funny in something that just so wasn't, and it wasn't appropriate. And I had to just like sit with it. But like in the company of a friend that would just be like, yeah, like it's all good. Like she wasn't just like, you a-hole for saying that. How could you say that? My dog died the day before. Like you're so insane. It wasn't like that. So it's just, sometimes you can just have this trust with people where you, what am I trying to get at? It's like sometimes you have to allow the times where it doesn't hit or it doesn't receive well, because maybe that happens once in a blue moon where it's super awkward and not so great. But if you allow those moments, then the good ones will come through.
Totally. Well, what I'm hearing you talk about is pushing boundaries a bit and then having enough grace to allow for people to push past a boundary, but not
and totally shit the bed sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And then not give them too hard of a time about it, because ultimately what's at the core of the individual is the most important thing, right? And understanding where that person's heart really is.
Where their heart is, what their intention is. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to just go around like telling malicious jokes to try and like hurt people. But if your intention is to make people laugh, because laughter is medicine and that's the heart of the person, then maybe check in with that. But it's a loaded topic. I mean, people are obviously very sensitive these days to all sorts of things, and some people just can't take a joke.
Yeah, but I find it really interesting though, like in terms of because it seems like humor is pretty important to you, right? That like when we get together, we usually laugh quite a lot.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And humor is really important to me as well, too. But I was just really contemplating this idea a little bit because I was thinking about like, okay, so this particular format that we're in right now is we're not two comedians talking. We're not going to try to do anything too racy. That's not what this is about, right? Like this is about an exploration of an individual and a celebration of someone's life and finding out about how they came to where they are. This is what I'm attempting to create with this. So any like over the top abstract humor gets put off to the side for the time being. And then here we are, right? But it just made me think about how important it is to value humor within friendships. Could you imagine having a friend that you didn't laugh with?
I'm like doing a mental scan of think if I have any friends that I couldn't have a laugh with.
It sounds impossible.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody.
Anyway, it's not a fully thought out idea. I was just thought I'd bring it up. And the other thing I want to make sure I bring up as well too is Ange Connolly, your wife, your partner of the last 23 plus years. So you're in a long-term relationship. You and Ange are a team.
Yeah.
You have a very strong bond between the two of you. I myself in a 20 plus year relationship. What is important to you about living this life that you have right now with a partner that you've had for so long? Why is that a decision that you made and have stuck to?
Decision. I don't know if it's a decision. I think it's just we've been together for so long that we meet each other's needs and we have goals with each other. And our dog Reggie has been an amazing experience for us to share in that love. The past couple of years, that's been huge for us to just care for this being and both be interested in his well-being. And we're also very different to each other. Ange has never been on social media. She's a private person. She's super funny and can yak it up with the best of them, but she wouldn't ever want to get on a podcast and like talk about herself or, be extroverted like I am. Like I'm happy to talk about myself and do podcasts and stuff like that, where she's the complete opposite. So I think it's kind of amazing that we're so different and yet we come together in this special way and carve out a life for each other that has been working. Like any relationship, it has its challenges, but we have a lot to be grateful for. Like, family, friends, it's a cute dog. We live in a really beautiful part of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Ange is pretty great. And she can yak it up with the best of them, that's for sure. And I guess also what you mentioned as well, too, about, as much as you guys have in common, there's also a number of things that you're quite different about with each other.
Yeah, opposites attract.
Here's another question for you, Luke. What do you see going forward in the future for yourself? And also, broadly speaking, in the world? Because I know that you're somebody who really pays close attention to what's going on in the world, and you're a very thoughtful, very, very thoughtful person who analyzes what's going on in the greater scheme of things. But what's a hope that you have for things moving forward in the world in general, and then also for your own life as well too?
Um, hope is a funny word for me. I not super crazy about that word, but I know the sort of soft, comforting context of it. I feel like hope is just something is a word that I have, taken a bit of issue with in recent years. What do I envision for the future of the world? I have no idea. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball on that. I mean, it's just constantly changing. There's a lot of tensions in so many different areas, and things are moving extremely fast. In my own life, what do I envision? I want to become a better poker player. I've been really into poker for the past few years. Um, I just love that game so much. And you and I used to play a lot of chess, and chess used to be my favorite game. And I used to like thinking about the philosophies and the moves and so much about that game and apply it to my life. And I kind of think about poker like that now too. Just there's so many different variables in it, and the game is influenced by the players that sit at the table and different styles, different energies of how people are that day. And I play a weekly poker game with a bunch of friends, and the laughs and teasing each other, and just so much goodness comes out of it. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I'd like to just get better at understanding that game. And Ange and I are just really happy with where we're living. So maybe work on our home a little bit more and fix some things up around the house that I'd like to do. Just regular stuff. Yeah.
Okay, right on.
I mean, and being analytical of what's going on in the world, I have been paying more attention to different changes that have been going on in recent years, and recognizing that there is something to be said about focusing on the inside world, because what's going on in the external it's just it's a minefield. And it's not to say that I want to ignore like pressing issues, and have a voice and vocalize things that I take issue with at the time, and have a conversation about things. And one thing I have noticed is, back to what we're talking about with humor and jokes and stuff and sensitivities and stuff. It's like, of course, it's good to be responsible with words and how you share opinions and ideas about things. But at the same time, I think it's really important for people to talk and have conversations, and not be so quick to dismiss each other just for having an opinion about one said topic. And I feel like that's been one thing that I've been really noticing, and I'm quite passionate about that, is just still having the conversations. And I've had some very awkward, uncomfortable conversations with people, but just through, I don't know, patience and just going through the motions and just back and forth and just trying to just get a better sense of where someone else is coming from. And I don't think we can always understand things. I mean, understanding is important, and sometimes it's okay to just not be able to understand a thing, but just like bear witness to it. So yeah, it's a balance between just bearing witness to what's going on and actually like engaging with what's going on and taking part and trying to have some fun and some play with it. So I'm grateful that I can do that in my art, because that is an area that I like to play. And yeah.
Yeah, I know for the last little while that you have engaged people in lots of different kinds of conversations, and that's something you're really good at, and being open to receiving what people are saying or feeling that might go in opposition to what you're saying, and engage in conversation and talk about it. And it's pretty good. And I think that the more opportunity that we all allow for people to hear each other out, have equal parts speaking and listening, and truly being open and being able to really try to appreciate where people are at as best as you can. Or like you say, if you can't even go there, just bear witness, right?
Yeah. And everyone has a story, and everyone has a connection to wherever they've landed in their temporary position in life. And, we don't always know why or how someone arrived at that. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of curiosity and time to get to hear those stories. And that's what's wonderful about what you're doing with your podcast, is you're taking time to be curious about someone and get to hear their story. And I've enjoyed listening to your podcast for that reason, because it's, even living on Pender Island for 9 years and then listening to guests that you've had and being like, oh, I had no idea that person had that story and that past, even though I've interacted with them so many times, because you're not always going to be able to get into that stuff with people that you maybe see in passing or in community. But in this kind of format, you get to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, right on, man. I appreciate you doing this. Is there anything else that you want to end off with or say to people listening that we didn't touch on this?
I would love for you to tell that dirty joke that you told me before we did this.
Okay, so a guy walks into a bar.
Stop. Don't do it.
Anyway, thanks for doing this, man.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate you inviting me to kick back and talk. And you're a good friend. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to that. It's really nice that people stick around to the end of the podcast and hear it from front to back. If you're listening to this, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I mentioned off the top, if you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to go back and listen to other episodes. There are some amazing people out there living in the world, and I'm doing my part to highlight them in this little corner of the world we live in. Once again, I'd like to thank Luke for doing that interview with me. I'd like to thank Ben McConkey for providing the theme music to this podcast. And again, thank you for listening. Until next time.